website. If all goes well, this will be posted on our website too for the people that have an interest. I know Zach Lindsay's teaching at this hour, out in Austin. He wants to see it, but here we go. Nope, sorry. Nope, sorry. All right, everybody see the nice big first slide. This is Lake Atitlán. And Maya cultural hero in the navel of the world. The Atitecos consider themselves living at the center of their universe. And we'll get into a slide from Vincent Stanzioni later on that'll explain this. But if they raise like the belly button of the world, they're at the center. There's 3 volcanoes that surround the lake and are really actually on the side of the lake that Santiago is on. Santiago is back that what you can see there in the farthest center. And this originally, I held this, I've done a new PowerPoint, of course, but I did this presentation and dressed up as Maximón for the final presentation that we did at the Museum of Science and Planetarium in Miami in August of 2015. And those were the days. And I dedicate this to the ancient merchant warriors and all of the traditionalists of Santiago Atitlán who continue to teach the old ways and perform the rituals so that balance is maintained and the middle world where we live may continue to exist. And my name, James, in Spanish is Santiago. And from way back, it was my favorite place to be. I love Santiago, and I would get there. Originally, there was no road around the lake. You had to get there on the mailboat, and the mailboat left around 11 and returned around 1 when the weather was usually better. And I also dedicate this to my good friend, who's now passed, Pat Manfredi. She used to be a board member of the IMS and was always at the front door taking people's names and credit card number. No. And I dedicated also to, past my good friend from Guatemala, the photographer Diego Molina that Rick mentioned. And my cat's on my sticky note. And John Major Jenkins. And here we go, the Lord of Looking Good. Quit that. That's the mom's humorous, yet ironically apropos nickname is christened by researcher Robert S. Carlson. We'll visit his literary contribution to this grand Maya cultural hero later in the program. Lake Atitlán is a lake in Guatemala highlands of the Sierra Madre mountain range. It is in the Sololá department of southwestern Guatemala, and it is the deepest lake in Central America. Atitlán means between the waters. In the Nahuatl language, ATL, Atl, is the word for water, and Titlán means between. The TL at the end of Atl is dropped and the words are combined to form Atitlán. A unique aspect of the climate is what is referred to as the chocomil of the Quiché language, meaning the wind that carried away sin. And the wind is common late in the morning and afternoon across the lake. It is said to be the encounter of warm winds from the Pacific meeting colder winds from the north. And that's why the mailboat only went between 11 and 1. So if you missed the boat at 1, you stayed the night in Santiago. The lake is surrounded by many Maya villages where the culture is still prevalent and traditional dress is worn. Maya people of Atitlán are predominantly Tutsuhil, and Caciquel. During the Spanish conquest of the Americas, the Caciquel initially allied themselves with the invaders to defeat their historic enemies, the Tutsuil and the Quiche, but they themselves were conquered and subdued when they refused to pay tribute to the Spanish. Several Maya archaeological sites are located around the lake. Sambayak, which I'll show some photos of later, is located approximately 55 feet below the current level of the lake and appears to be from at least the late pre-classic period. There are remains of multiple groups of buildings, including one particular group of large buildings that are believed to have been the city center. A second site, let me see, Chiutinomit, where the remains of a city were found, was discovered by local fishermen who noticed what appeared to be a city underwater. During subsequent investigations, pottery shards were recovered from the site by divers, which enabled the dating of the site to the late pre-classic period, 300 BCE to 300 CE, more specifically 250 CE. Santiago Atitlán is the largest of the lakeside communities and is noted for the worship of Maximón, an idol formed by the fusion of traditional Maya deities, Catholic saints, and conquistador legends. The institutionalized effigy of Maximón is under the control of a local religious brotherhood called Cofradia and resides in various houses of its membership during the course of the year, being most ceremoniously moved in a grand procession during Semana Santa, Holy Week, Easter, and several towns in Guatemala have similar cults, most notably the cult of San Simón, Saint Simon in Zunil. Although of unknown origins, Maximón is said to be a manifestation of the Maya god Mam. I usually say Mom, but Mam, I guess, is also right, but I like Mom, who reigned over the Wayeb, which is the 5-day period between the end of one year and the beginning of the next, and who represented the wooden effigy dressed in human clothes. His origin as a Mesoamerican merchant and lineage deity originates in the pre-classic Maya world around 500 BCE. Now this is looking from the shore of Santiago Atitlán across the lake, and that's where the ancient site of Chiutinomit, I think there's an I missing, depending on the spelling, is on the ridges that are right there across, and then part of it is underwater. And what's interesting is when the Spanish came and conquered the Tutsuil, they built their church in the right place in Santiago on top of a Maya existing ceremonial site, but they did not destroy the ancient capital of Tutsuil. So I think that's at least a little good. Maximón is Lord of Merchants. You can see a man with his headband there tied to carry the back load, similar to God El and God M of the ancient Maya. He is a tireless walker of roads without end. His wanderings lead him to wherever he is called, as well as to all those places where he creates problems that only he alone can solve. He is the shapeshifter who alters his shape to the changing shape of the world in which he exists as trickster. And because of this, his disguises are infinite. Maximón is one who opens or closes the door to opportunity, creates an accidental meeting at the crossroads, or finds the needed connection at the marketplace. And here we see God El appearing in the codices and also at Palenque on the door jambs of Temple of the Cross. And you can see here he's got his Jaguar on like I do, and he's smoking a a nice big pipe, and both images are smoking, and that's the tradition that's survived with Maximón. Here's a drawing of Gadel by Linda Sheely. And let me just say a little bit more about Maximón. He's a being who changes his skin to imitate another being or an environment, a completely flexible being whose way is no way. Maximón is ever present in his many forms, but mostly he is known to take the form of one of the following: a young girl, the old man, the Latina temptress, the poor beggar, the wealthy plantation owner, a hummingbird, a blue jay, a skunk, a wealthy plantation owner, maybe twice he's done that, the wild mountain dahlia, the divine tree, or a whirlwind, a night breeze, an earth tremor, a fly, a mosquito, the wafting scent of a cigar, or even the ripple across still water. So he has many manifestations that come to people in the altered states. Like all tricksters, he makes himself known to his followers through his signs given on the road, where a heightened sense of insecurity is always felt. All of his disguises or changes give messages to those who follow his guidance to safe passage and profitable markets. And these are usually, we'll get to see some of the altars and people petitioning, and there's usually a priest, a shaman priest from the village who will accompany them. They're being paid by the client to intercede with Maximón in this kind of thing. Sometimes the people petitioning have had dreams that need to be interpreted. He is Lord of all those portals of opportunity where tax collectors let no one pass unmolested, where obstacles are lifted, where government officials look the other way, where traps are avoided, and where doors of opportunity are flung right open. He is the Lord of the crossroads, where destinies actually come together for better or worse. He is Lord of the marketplace, where abundances are turned into wealth, where finding a new product or a person brings about a life reversal. And here we have a Maya trader, obviously a wealthy trader, showing up in Cacaxtla. Cacaxtla is an archaeological site located near the southern border of the Mexican state of Tlaxcala. It was a sprawling palace containing vibrantly colored murals painted in unmistakable Maya style, even though it was in the highlands of Mexico. Cacaxtla conserves the oldest mural painting featuring a human figure and symbols from other cultures, including Teotihuacan, Maya, Mixtec, and Totonac. The city probably controlled important trade routes through the region. Excuse me. And here you can see the pack he's pulling. He's got quetzal feathers attached on the outside. And in the larger photo, you can see his typical hat that we saw in the drawing by Linda Sheely. He's wearing jaguar, and he's got jaguar paw footwear on. And in an illustration, you can see that he's approaching a cacao tree. And there's the important principal bird deity at the top of the tree. Maximón is known variously as a Maya version of Saint Simon, a satanic figure, a representation of Judas, or a link to the Spanish Emperor Pedro de Alvarado. Analysts say he is a blend of the Maya earth Lord Mam and the apostle Simon Peter, Jesus's first disciple. And I really love showing these home and village altars dedicated to Maximón. And we'll get to the primary one in Santiago in a little while, but I just wanted to show you the diversity of adoration of the cult of Maximón goes on. Notice the young man there, Nicholas, with his beautiful bird embroidered Santiago pants. These are the traditional pants that they wear on special occasions or doing ceremonies. And it's really interesting to me to see all the different people. There's a deer head hanging on the back corner. And there's no way I could speak about MASH any better than the following words from a native's point of view. The story comes from a local oral tradition that was written down by Atiqueto, or a citizen of Santiago Atitlán, and is published on the town's own website. But at times very wise and times very crazy, the figure of Maximón has confused outsiders for many years. The combination of saint, devil, is one of the strongest remnants of the native philosophy in Santiago Atitlán. Although encouraged at first by the Catholic Church, Maximón was eventually persecuted and at one time made to go underground. Because of his great influence, he was very much feared by the Catholic Church, and in order to deal with him, they represented him as Judas of Iscariot, the betrayer of Jesus. To the people of Santiago, however, he represents something completely different. Maximón to them means he who is tied with a string or a lasso. Rilashman means great-grandfather, or in other words, the grandfather of all the people in the town of Santiago Atitlán. Maximón is also known as, I mentioned Mam or Rishlam Mam, ancestor or great ancestor. Here we see the public altar in Zunil, San Simón de Zunil, and you can see, I'll get into the differences later, but here he's in an area where he wears dark sunglasses and dark clothing. And you can see to the right, they're selling what's called miracle water. When during Easter week, they will clean the statue and wash the clothes. And they use the water from washing his clothes to be miracle water that they end up selling throughout the year. There's three main places where the Maximón cult appears, and that is in Santiago Atitlán, in Zunil, and in San Andrés Estapa. Here we see a beautiful altar in Panajachel, which was always my starting off point to head to Santiago. Here's an outdoor mosh setup. And I'm just suspicious, if you look closely, it could be sort of an expatriate living in Guatemala, or perhaps someone here in the States, because it is interesting that so many of the people that have migrated to the US still set up altars here in the US in their homes to Maximón. He's got his Jose Cuervo, his Suaza, Coca-Cola, a lot of money in the front, a little iguana, American flags, and of course Bacardi gold. So his two Barbies. I mean, this is a special altar. Here's another one. They always include, it's strange there's no flowers here, but there's the candles, which I'll get into, colors, and money, indigenous telas, a postcard, and I believe that is a postcard of one of a series that Diego Molina and I did together. This one's really interesting because look at all the archaeological vestiges. This must be a big finca where they've been able to find on our land all these special things. Amazing, amazing. We'll also see an indigenous painting of the Last Supper scenes that you see up above. We'll see an indigenous painting of that. Here's a giant little stogie for a miniature Maximón in the outdoor garden. And Maximons are for sale, especially in Antigua, Guatemala. You can go to the shops there, and they all have a price tag. They all have a little bit different. They're all handmade, hand painted. Where do I get into the colors? Oh, well. And this max sold for almost $700. It includes the hand carved head with pipe, arms and hands, and feet with sandals. Also includes a wooden chair, staff, and locally expertly weaved Maya clothing. So let's zoom across the lake. And this is how I used to travel in the mailboat. Sometimes I would put my back up on top of the roof and ride up on top of the roof. And like I said before, Santiago is my favorite place to be. Here's another example of all the beautiful embroidered pants. I have 2 pairs of these pants that aren't embroidered, but my friend Dan, who came 3 times to visit me while I was living in Guatemala, he bought one of the beautiful embroidered men's pants. And here we have a woman's wupil with all the beautiful birds. And the original name of Santiago was Sitkin Hai, House of Birds. And here we have a photo. Now, if you see images with a name at the bottom of the photo, that's because I know who the photographer was. And then later on, you'll see quit, bug. My cat's changing it. Quit that. So this is by our good friend George Ferry, who I'm thinking is probably trying to tune in right now. And I was standing next to him when he took that photo. And here's Sacred Laundry going on in the back. Notice their yards are filled with the volcanic stone, and even their houses, at least the traditional ones back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, were still made with the stone. So let's investigate some of the additional perspectives. This is Dancing with Maximón, which was part of the, usually the, that looks like an outside village celebrating the Holy Week here again. And notice the fruit and sometimes even giant sausages and flowers and the seeds from the palms are offered there above. We'll see that also. Quit that book. Quit. Stop. I'm going to put you down. Here's a nice colorful one. In the ensuing years, there's a lot more colors to work with. And just like the women in their weaving, sometimes they'll weave in a little sparkle. The painters also are getting into the more vibrant color schemes. It brings the paintings alive. And notice again the fruit in the background, pineapples, bananas. Quit that. Stop. Notice the noise makers. These are to book. I'm gonna put you down. Wait, I gotta put my cat down. He's making an advance. And these are processions. This is during Holy Week. And notice the noisemaker in the one guy's hand there. And this is to scare away the spirits. Here we have a big one being placed. And this is in San Pedro La Laguna. That's at the entrance of the lake. If you're coming down from Guatemala City or Antigua to the lake, you'll first encounter either Panajachel or San Pedro, depending on the way you get there. Look at the guys hanging out in the window on the outside. I think that's one. And then Wansisai. Wansisai was the first painter from Santiago Atitlán. Like most Tutsuil Maya, he came from a poor campesino family, and he worked carting things to market on his back. and as a day laborer in other people's fields. In 1947, when Sisai was in his mid-20s, he encountered a tourist in the plaza painting a picture of the church. When the artist finished his painting, he gave Sisai some of his paints. With these paints, Juan Sisai completed his first painting, and he sold the painting for $1, quite a lot of money in those times. The sale motivated him to continue painting because it was an easier way to earn money. And Santiago Atitlán is one of the places nearly all Guatemalan tourists want to visit. And by waiting for tourists as they disembarked from the boats at the docks, Sisai had a ready market for his paintings. Entirely self-sought, Juan Sisai initially worked in tempera and paper and eventually switching to oil and canvas. This is a painting of the market in Chichicastenango by Juan. This is self-portrait on the left. He had many self-portraits. A painting of Juan's on the right of Maximón, and this is an early painting of Juan and one of his sons. And nowadays, two of his sons have carried on the tradition and are famous painters from Santiago in their own right. But let me say that back when I lived in Guatemala in the 1980s and worked with Diego, he, of course, I lived above the Diego's photography studio. So we would have people come, musical groups, people take our album covers. And once Sisai came to the studio, I opened the door and got to greet him and have him come in with us or something. But it was a great honor to meet Juan. And then he was later assassinated during the problems. It hit Santiago really hard. So it was sad to know about 6 months later after I met him, he was no longer. And this is, I mentioned, the Last Supper. This is an indigenous painting of the Last Supper. Notice the 3 volcanoes in the background. And here's another indigenous painting. And you'll see in the painting that Mash is wearing 2 white Stetson hats. And on the right, you'll see an image by Robert Sittler. And this is from June 2010, when we went with a group for the Maya Conservancy. And we went and Robert Sittler gifted Maximón with a new white Stetson hat. So that was an important day. And here, let's go and visit the Cofradía Santa Cruz, who are the ones who are the caretakers of Mash. Here's a little sign: to continue the care and upkeep of Maximón, we would like you to contribute. 2 quetzales per person, 10 quetzales to take a photo, 25 quetzales to take a video. It's used to buy candles, incense, and pay for the marimba. Thank you for supporting our traditions, the Cofradía de Santa Cruz. So these are images of Maximón's main home, where he resides throughout the year. And over the years, each one is a little bit different. In the back, you'll notice a Jesus lying in a glass case. Maximón is sort of like the alter ego of Jesus, as I'll explain later. And like here to the right, this is a priest shaman who's accompanying a client and petitioning Maximón on her behalf. These are photos of Mash from Diego Molina, and as Rick mentioned, Diego would take the photos and I would put together the printed materials that were printed in Spain even. And we did a 72-page full color report magazine about Maximón and the tradition of Santiago. And these are a couple photos from that time. There's always flowers involved. And one thing I forgot to mention is, before we got to Santiago altars, I should have mentioned that Max appears differently in different areas. So in San Jorge de la Laguna, he dons the expression of what is translated as a hangman. It's always sort of tied into cowboy movies. In San Simón de Zanil, he wears dark glasses and uses a digital watch. In areas affected by the Civil War in Guatemala, he wears military clothes and camouflage. Quit that. Don't quit that. In Santiago Atitlán, quit that. Bug, you gotta get down. In Santiago Atitlán, he wears a tailored suit adorned with layers of colorful ties and scarves, and always one or two Stetson hats. The most Hollywood-esque representation of Maximón is in San Andres Estapa, that we showed a photo of in Chimaltenango. His face is very pale with a long nose, a big mustache, a black fleece hat, resembling characters from a Western movie. Now this is when I visited, I took John Major Jenkins twice. He wanted me to guide him through Guatemala and to the site of Izapa, where researchers believe that two of the Maya calendars, the sacred calendar and the Hob agricultural calendar, were started. And we would always go by Lake Atitlán. And this is the morning that we went. And we went there. We were the first people to get there. So we actually, they had us sit at the table behind there while they took Mash down from the rafters. He sleeps up in the rafters of the tin roof. And then later on, the attendant felt so good about us being there that he sang a couple songs. And I do have those songs recorded somewhere, but this computer doesn't seem to play that earlier version of my MP4s or whatever they're saved in. This is a photo by our own Janet Mies of her visit with Maximón. And I call these guys because see how they're wearing the same shirt on the left? There was a time, I'm not sure what year it was, but they normally at Easter time, they clean and wash Mash and they'll parade him around, and then they'll parade him to the house where he's going to reside for the next year. But those two guys kept him for another year, which was bucking with tradition. But there's also a tradition of you can change the tradition and start a new tradition. So I remember being there that year, and I knew about it. And so I was talking with Maximón and telling him, you know, I'm sorry these people are doing this, but really I didn't need to say that I'm sorry for these people's actions. They were legitimately doing what they want, and that's, you can change the tradition. Now this is a very important time that we were there. This is in October of 2010. I was there with the Maya Conservancy in June, and then I went back with a group in October to be a part of the Wishaki Bats, the Maya New Year ceremonies of the new beginning of another sacred calendar cycle with Tat Rigoberto Chanchavec, except Chanchavec in Momostenango. So we first had the group go there, and we had a beautiful ceremony. They take place about 5 o'clock in the morning and then end when the sun is coming up. But here we made our way over to the lake, and this lady on the right is Kathy Robertson, and she had lost, her brother went missing about 2 years earlier with they never knew what happened to him. So it was unanswered questions. So she hired a little priest guide to petition Mosh on her behalf. And Mosh is smoking one of my cigarettes right there on the left. The other guy's an attendant. In the next frame, look how the expression of the attendant changes as the room fills with copal incense. I hit the wrong one. Now we go from here to there. And he really takes an interest in how serious everything has gotten and what is being interpreted as what she was petitioning. And in the background here, they set our groups around in the back, and then we witnessed not only Karen's interaction with Mosh, but we also witnessed at least 2 other instances of where the shaman priests would bring in their clients, and we were there to be kind of witnesses. So here we have Anita Gorth, and she lives in Sweden. And back in the back there is Garth and Cheryl Norman. Garth, of course, famous for his excavations and research at the site of Izapa where the calendar started. And I have a message from Anita. She goes, what I referred to as the Maximón seance was a bizarre experience which I was totally unprepared for. I knew nothing of that special section of Maya worship, a saint effigy, all covered in neckties and crowned by a cowboy hat. He had a hole in his mouth in which lit cigarettes were constantly inserted. Considerable amounts of rum was offered and passed around in a jar for all to drink, and I drank much. The cellar-like room became filled with copal and tobacco smoke as the seance went on, and me having great difficulties with my asthma was in peril. After the ceremony, Kathy told me she had the most important experience while I walked drunk arm in arm with Jim towards the hotel. And also, Janice Van Cleve was there, and that's her way over there on the left, and I have a message from her that my cat is sitting on. Let me get it. She goes, the shrine is in a dim, dusty back room in a rambling barrio of similar rooms. It has a tin roof with no windows. The ceiling is decked out in a checkerboard of cheap plastic doilies interspersed with colored balloons. 2 of the checkerboard squares hold circular fluorescent bulbs, lights for illumination. Leaning against the walls on either side of the entrance are painted statues of saints carved in wood like you'd expect in an old village church. Among them is a statue for death and several images in coffins decked with plastic flowers. Votive lamps flicker before them. In the center of the room is a table with a bench behind which visitors can sit, and the idol of Maximón is propped up in front. He smokes and drinks, so a lighted cigarette is constantly in a mouth. This creates the image of movement and life in the statue. Here the cigarettes were an offering from Jim Reed, and you can see the whole pack on the table behind Max. Max is clothed with various hanks of cloth, and on his head are 2 cowboy hats, both with pink and purple veils hanging off. Then the priest arrived with Kathy. They kneel before Mash and line up more candles in front of the votives already there. The priest prays on the client's behalf. The prayers were in Cachiquel, which I didn't understand, but they seemed to say that the client is a good person and please grant her request. At one point, the priest removes one of the cowboy hats and places it on Kathy's head with the veil hanging down in front, covering her face. He says some more prayers and then has her kiss the hat on all four sides of it before returning it to the idol. This may have been a symbolic way of bonding the client and the god. The priest heaps generous scoops of copal into a censer, producing thick clouds of sweet smoke. He censes the idol, then the client, and himself. Then he passes it around so we can all smudge ourselves. The tightly crowded room, billowing smoke, flickering candles in the dark, and tacky decorations are almost overpowering. Our vision blurs and breathing is difficult. The mind gets a little dizzy. The combination actually does work to transform the dingy little room into an otherworldly place. Toward the end of the ceremony, client makes her personal prayers to Maximón. She seems not at all shy that she is asking for very personal things in front of all these visitors. In fact, our role there was to lend support to her pleas, and she gratefully asked Maximón to include our wishes in his own. Finally, the deacon pours the beer and passes the cups around. Then he pours shot glasses of rum and passes them around as well. After he repeats this several times, we're all thinking this religion is looking pretty darn good. And let's go to some photos of Mom's house on the on the plaza there in front of the famous church in the square of Santiago. And it seems like
Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt imposed
cat is too much. And these are a couple of photos I took one time when I was there. And
hide his bias. But the American stance towards the Gulf patch.
I think my cat knows that he's making a problem of himself. And Mom's houses seems to be painted maybe different every year. I don't know. And this is by George Ferry. Another one by Brian Schaefer. And here's an older picture of Mom's home. And especially during Holy Week, during Semana Santa, they'll bring him down to his house from the Cofradia's house where he's been residing all year. And what's interesting is that years ago, I was there in Santiago, and I'm sort of a night owl, so it's hard for me to go to sleep early. And I had gone down to the square there in front of the church, and nobody else was there. The kids playing soccer and everything had already gone off. Nobody was nobody at all. There was nobody around. And I sat on the porch and had a cigarette. And lo and behold, imagine this room totally dark with pine needles all over the floor and just some flickering candles, and then the smoke. You couldn't see from one side of the room to the other, but the door opened and an old woman looked out and motioned for me to come in. And oh my gosh, this was such a sacred experience for me to be invited in on the most important night. Like he had already been bathed that day, so these were his new clothes for his processions to come in the next 3 days. It was amazing. And the best thing was, I'll mention some books later about experiences with the cofradia by Americans who were accepted in and learned Tutsoil and stuff like that. But they talk of a couple especially powerful Maya shaman priests, a part of the cofradia. And I think I got to see one of these guys because there was this old man who came and in front of me started dancing. And I mean, imagine an 85-year-old man high-stepping dancing to where his knees are like touching his elbows and just whirling around. It was amazing, amazing. That was a complete blessing to me. So this church is, like I mentioned before, built in 1547 on top of a Maya altar. And it's really something special. And it's really an extension of the world tree that's growing up through the center of the village. And on the inside of the church, let me see if I can find my place. Another photo by George Ferry. The altar place was all done by Atiteco artisans, the whole, I mean, the construction of the church and everything. But they were able to sort of, even though the priests were telling them to do this or do that, they were sneaking in connections to the Maya and their traditions. And you'll see at the bottom of this, where the candles are, there's carved wooden panels. And the one in the center middle, and I meant it's the flowering mountain tree. So to the Catholics, this is one thing. To the Maya, this is a major thing, to have a representation of the flowering mountain tree in the town's church. And the one centerpiece is dedicated to Maximón. And you can see, let me go back. It transcends. It's a mixture of the Maya and the Catholic. And on the left are Maya people approaching. You have the people doing a ceremony with Mash in the middle, and then on the right you have the church and people being blessed by the members of the church, or people being blessed by Maximón. Here's a drawing of it. You can see a little bit better of the detail. Notice that the people on the left there, they've got a jaguar pelt on, deer skins on, and then you get to the Spanish side and it's you know, your normal robes and stuff like that. So the most important week of the whole yearly cycle of festivities and ceremonies in Santiago Atitlán and around Maximón have to do with Semana Santa. And the most unusual of religious celebrations is found in Santiago, in the shadows of three towering volcanoes, in a large whitewashed courtyard in front of a Catholic church dating back to the 1500s. Holy Week sees an impressive demonstration of the unique blend of Maya and Catholic religious traditions known as syncretism, a mixture of different religions and cultures. That culmination is seen daily inside the Catholic Church of Santiago, where statues of saints line the walls dressed in colorful garments, reminiscent of the trajes and traditional coverings, costumes worn by the area's indigenous population. During Holy Week, this fusion of Maya and Catholic traditions becomes even stronger as town folks prepare the statues of the Virgin Mary and Jesus for their ceremonial processions that take place on Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday. And Dolores Ratson, who's a local Atiteca, and she was interviewed by CNN or something, but the Maya really take good care of Jesus. She described how the caretakers of the ancient and valued statue of Jesus meticulously change his clothing and the sheets in which he is wrapped while hanging on the cross. When they change the sheets, they wash them and they use that water as holy water. According to the Maya way of thinking, Jesus is associated with the corn god. There are flowers everywhere. The Maya of Santiago believe that when a person dies and is buried, he or she transforms into flowers. When the statue of Jesus is taken down from the cross on Good Friday, it will be installed in an elaborate 6-foot-long casket of glass and metal and paraded around the village. His head will be decorated not with a crown of thorns, but with one of colorful flowers. Good Friday is the most solemn moment of days of the intense ritual, and the statue of Christ is brought down the pyramid-like stairs at the front of the church. It is carried on the shoulders of dozens of Atiteco men dressed in traditional costumes. Another extraordinary manifestation of the amalgamation of Maya and Catholic traditions that are taking place at the same time. Jesus always comes out first, and then Maximón, and then the Virgin Mary. At almost the same time, the statue of the indigenous Maya demigod Maximón is carried on the shoulders of members of the cofradia. This person, known as a titanil, carries the revered statue of the Mayan deity from his chapel in the courtyard below the Catholic Church. And the followers, it follows the statue of Jesus with almost dance-like movements. And the titanil, the man holding Mash up on his shoulders, serves as Mash's symbolic horse. And that's a tie-in with Pedro Alvarado always parading around on a horse. Mash has his own horse. To some Western tourist eyes, viewing the simultaneous parading of the statues of Maximón and Jesus on Good Friday may seem like a demonstration of dueling deities. But Dolores Ratson says this is not the case at all. No, they're not competing, she says. They go together because the celebration of Jesus to the Maya represents the corn, like Jesus's resurrection, and then Maximón is like the Maya protector, with whom many ancestors left their knowledge, their medicine, and their prayers. So the Maximón is the holy grandfather who follows Jesus, like father and son. It's not competing, they are working together. Excuse me. On Good Friday, the statue of Christ is taken down from the cross and carefully prepared for burial in an ornate coffin. And he's the Señor Sepultado, the buried Lord, and he's paraded through the streets. Notice the same noisemakers as depicted in the indigenous paintings. Notice all the copal. Notice all the flowers and the fruit. And this, as part of that same October 2010 trip, our group took along the two Maya people you see on the left. This is husband and wife. This is Nicolasa and Antolin. He's a ceremonial man from Tecpan, which is outside the Maya ceremonial site of Iximche. And we did flower petal ceremony here. We went to Quiriguá and we did a flower petal ceremony in Quiriguá, which you'll see. And then we went on to Copan. And we were some of the first to ever do a Maya ceremony around Copan. So that was something strange. Here I'm offering my offerings and prayers. And I'm wearing, if you can see in the center of my chest, is a beautiful gift from Mary Lou Ridinger and her husband Jay. It's a representation of it's carved in bone with 3 pieces of jade, a beautiful copy of what was found in a tomb in Copan. And then the headwear, the red with the 4 directional, whatever you call it, was gifted to me by the Quiches when we did the ceremonies back in June. Standing behind me is Vincent Stanzioni. And Vincent joined us at the Wishaki Bats. He didn't go with us to Maximón, but he lives around the lake. But he did accompany us on this journey. And this is Vinny giving his prayers and offerings while I'm standing behind him. Now this is our ceremony at Quiriguá, and this was so very special. And while I was walking around videotaping, and I think I did a presentation at the IMS about this, but while we were doing the ceremony, one of the 4 birds that's depicted in the colorful murals of San Bartolo appeared in the tree, that big tree behind us and above us. And it was something special. That bird doing its special song while we were doing the ceremony was really another manifestation of the God, the force be with us. The gods were acknowledging our presence. And that is Anita Gorther on the left. She's holding an eagle feather, and I have a message from her. She goes, now if the seance at the Maximón house was bizarre to me, the fire ceremony at Quiriguá conducted by Antolin was a true spiritual experience. It was Tsikinde, the feather in my hand, eagle, I brought with me from Sweden. You had premiered me in a letter about this particular ceremony after finding out that eagle is my day of birth. Wonderful Antolin and his wife Nicolasa built a beautiful fire altar at the lush green ancient Maya site. I threw my candles and the feather into the fire along with prayers while you ran around the fire with spread arms shrieking like an eagle. I entered an elevated state of consciousness and was high like a kite for hours. And here I am in a picture by George Ferry of doing my little eagle dance. And the guy in the background center is my great friend, Carlos. He, back when I lived in Guatemala, I was a surfer, and my parents and sister brought me my surfboard. They came to visit 6 months after I started living in Guatemala. They brought me my surfboard, and down at the beach in Puerto San Jose, under a lifeguard stand, I saw surfboards. And I made friends with the guys, and Carlos has been my best friend all these years, been more than 40 years. But I also have a message from Carlos about this exact ceremony, and I translated it, and it looks like he's a pretty good writer. He goes, this trip was a great experience for me. The spiritual peace of being in the cities of my ancestors took me on a spiritual journey to the time they lived in those cities, so rich in their pre-Columbian cultures, their rituals, and sacrifice to the Maya gods. Their pyramids constructions are exactly connected to the planets. So I thought that was really nice. Now here's more. Back still in Antigua, Vinny gave my group a talking to. He told us a lot. And he did mention the significance of this stone sculpture that's here and that has gardens around it that's honored for some reason. But both Janice Van Cleve and I both can't remember what the significance. It looks to me like the sad lion and the Wizard of Oz, who's got a heart of stone, or it does look like perhaps an indigenous face profile. The photo of Vinny on the right is by Janice Van Cleve. And Vinny also went with us on a boat to float over Samawak, and which was strange because the announcement by Nat Geo on the right, that's a photo of cenote that they're publicizing the Maya Atlantis. I don't know. I think that's strange. I think that Nat Geo could have done a better job. But from La Prensa in Guatemala, who I've also done a lot of ads for, especially for the French perfumes in Guatemala, I would have ads that would come out in La Prensa and El Gráfico. But this is the report they did about Samabak. And notice in the bottom corner how the level of the lake changed over time. This is a stela that's still standing there on the bottom. And you can see in the lower right the illustration of how large some of the buildings must have been, originally. And so they're saying about 200 AD or CE, the coast of the lake was a lot lower than what it was. And Samabak was on that what was an island, and the level of the lake rose. And interesting enough, they always thought the lake was kind of sealed, but the earthquake in '76 did open up a fissure where apparently a lot of the water of the lake was able to go out, and the lake level changed once again, even in 1976. This is some ceramics they found still in situ. And now I was in correspondence with Robert Samoya, who discovered the site, and he's got a little museum now in Panajachel where you can go and see some of these, the history of the excavations of the site, discovery of the site, and a lot of the ceramics. And then Vincent Stanzioni is a great man. He's and this is his probably his most popular book. Vincent is an American anthropologist living in Guatemala. He specializes in ancient and contemporary Maya religion. He has lived in Guatemala Highlands and worked along with the Tutsuil Maya of Santiago for over 35 years, participating in authentic Maya ritual and having been accepted into the Santa Cruz Cofradia. He has observed, photographed, and participated in their ritual and ceremonial life, which he describes with unique authority in this account of the continuities of the Mayan culture from pre-Columbian times to the present. And David Carrasco of Harvard University says, this book represents both a confirmation and an invocation in the scholarship and fieldwork about the religious imagination and rites of passage of Maya peoples. I know of no book that is able to A, link the pre-Hispanic, colonial, and contemporary religious practices of these people into a coherent narrative, B, combine anthropological religious studies theory with linguistics and ongoing fieldwork as creatively, and C, illuminate the debate between models of syncretism and transculturation about the contemporary ritual cycle as Stanzioni's beautifully illustrated work. These are photos from his book. On the right is Vinny when he was younger and participating in all the experiences he had there with the cofradia. On the right is, you can see some of the plants and fruits and that are used, especially during Holy Week. Call him the flower man. And this is really interesting. I mentioned the center of the Tutsuil universe. In Vinny's book, he has this illustration, and you can see looking from the San Pedro side of the lake over towards the south-southeast, you see the different sunrise points that mark the different equinoxes and solstices. All those other little names are names of little remains of little carved ceremonies. The carved stela. There's a carved jaguar in the hill right behind Santiago. Also, one of these, I'm not sure which, but it has to do with the sacred mushrooms. I guess there was some place especially where the mushrooms grew really well. And also the Bufus marinus toads, which we got to see when we did a lakeside Santiago ritual in the June of 2010. We had to walk through these cornfields to get to the lake, and the corn was the tallest corn I've ever seen. It must have been 25 or 30 feet high. You walk through these giant towers of corn stalks. But in the little gullies of how rainwater and the water would move through the field, and all the low wet spots, you'd see all of these giant big old fat toads, and they were the ones that appear in the carvings of Estapa that apparently have the glands on their back, like we have it here in the cane toads of South Florida, that had some hallucinogenic properties. And then I'm going to flip this so you can see the view of the sunset alignments from Santiago looking over towards the northwest. Volcán de San Pedro, you got the winter solstice, equinox, summer solstice, and see that Chutunamit, the ancient little capital area there. And then Vinny has this excellent report of photography of the fruit of the tutsuil. Because Easter celebrations often coincide with celebrations of the Maya New Year and the coming of the spring rains, there is one other aspect of the rituals in Santiago that dates back to pre-Columbian times. And at the beginning of Holy Week, the men of Santiago begin a long trek of 24 hours from their village to the Pacific coast. And they bring back, returning with boxes and baskets of colorful tropical fruits like coconuts, mangoes, plantains, and they use that to decorate the villages, as we saw earlier in the processions of Maximón, or even on people's altars, you saw all those fruits and flowers. This is a big sacrifice that the men of Santiago make, says once again Dolores Ratson. And she's always among the women who welcome the men back to the village. So they go down over the mountain, over the Cauldron range there, and then they go down, I believe it's to the town of Patsun, there on the Pacific coast. And that's where they bring back all these fruits and offerings. And it's timed when, let's say they put some mangoes in their pack down in Patsun, it has to be timed with the fact that mangoes will ripen by the time they get back to the village. And then these men here are the ones who inspect to see that the fruit having been brought back by the men is indeed ripe and can be used and passed among the village for the decorations and Holy Week ceremonies. Another important book that Janice Van Cleve is reading right now is The War for the Heart and Soul of a Highland Maya Town by Robert S. Carlson. And it's come out in 25 editions between 1966 and 2011. After a decade of military occupation known as the Violencia, the Tutsuil-speaking Maya of Santiago stood up to the Guatemalan army in 1990 and forced it to leave their town. Yet that act of solidarity did not close the widening internal divisions that threatened to stabilize the community from within, mostly the evangelicals against Maya tradition. Ironically, after 100 years of resistance of physical and spiritual conquest, many Atiqueños now seem eager to abandon their traditional Maya culture. In this compelling ethnography, Robert S. Carlson explores the issue of cultural continuity and change as it has unfolded in this representative Maya community. Drawing on documentary evidence, he argues that local Mayan culture survived the Spanish conquest remarkably intact and continues to play a defining role in the religious and social life of the community. The book reflects 15 years of field research in Atitlán, where Carlson learned Tutsuhil, was accepted into the Santa Cruz Cofradía, and was a first-hand witness to the La Violencia, as I was. And it presents a rare insider's perspective. Another book, it's very popular. I was going to show a copy of it here. I have it next to me, but I'm not going to switch over. Is Scandals in the House of Birds, Shamans and Priests on Lake Atitlán by Nathaniel Tarn, along with Martin Pachel. I'll mention Martin's books after Nathaniel's. Nathaniel was born in Paris, France, was educated at Cambridge University, also a university in Paris, also the University of Chicago, the London School of Economics, and the London School of Oriental and African Studies. He's a poet, translator, editor, critic, and anthropologist. Based on a 30-year span of fieldwork in the Lake Atitlán area of Guatemala, Scandals in the House of Birds is a multi-voiced epic of a sacred crime and its tangled mythic, religious, and political ramifications. Maximón, the wooden statue venerated since pre-Columbian times, is stolen from the local villagers and sent to a European museum. And it was finally returned decades later, largely thanks to Nathaniel Tarn's intervention. On the center picture of the wooden mask is the original mask of Maximón that was stolen, went to Europe, was returned. Up at the top is Nathaniel in younger days. He's returning from a 7-hour walk from the Pacific coast to the highlands. That was in 1953. And down at the bottom is one of the famous, and this really does look like the guy who danced in front of me. This is the famous shaman Nicolas Sibuliu, a friend of Martin Pachel in the center, and Nathaniel Tarn. Now, Martin Pachel, and interesting enough, on one of my first trips to the lake, when I would stay in Panahatil the night before, taking the mailboat to Santiago the next day. And I was walking around Panahatil, and somebody told me, "You're a gringo." And I go, "Yes." They go, "Well, you should go meet the gringo who's living up the stream river that flows down from the mountains through Panahatil. And he's living up there in a teepee." And at the time, I didn't go walking up there by myself, but that was Martin Pachel. When he first got to Lake Atitlán, he was living in a teepee before he ever moved across the lake to Santiago. So Martin was raised on a Pueblo reservation in New Mexico. And 45 years ago, the young musician and painter wandered through the brilliant landscapes of Mexico and Belize. His account of life with the Mayan community in Guatemala captures the magic and mystery of a wise and magnificent people. Arriving at Santiago, Pachel met Nicolas Sibuliu Tascochoy, perhaps the most famous shaman in Tutsuhil history. But Pachel was a new student he had asked the guides to provide. Their poetry resonates throughout the book with a rhythm that reinforces the vitality of the vanishing culture. For the next 13 years, Pachel studied the ancient Tutsuhil culture and became a village chief and a famous shaman in his own right. Life in the Honey in the Heart is both a personal memoir and a portrait of the important community identity. But his, excuse me, his most famous one is right here by my side too, Secrets of the Talking Jaguar, Memoirs from the Living Heart of a Maya Village. Pichel brings to vivid light the sights, sounds, and scents and colors of Santiago Atitlán, its magical personalities, its beauty, its material poverty and spiritual richness. It 800-year-old rituals juxtaposed with quintessential small town gossip. The story of his education is a tale filled with enchantment, danger, passion, and hope. And this is the photo shared by Martin Purcell. But this is the end of my show. I wanted to lead you on to some books that discuss everything I've talked about. But I gotta point out, in my research just lately, I came across this warning about Martin that Dr. Nathaniel Tarn, author of The Scandals in the House of Birds, and Dr. Robert Carlson, author of The War and Heart for the Heart and Soul of a Highland Maya Town, wish to disassociate themselves completely from the latest activities of Mr. Martin Purcell. When they worked with him in the 70s, Mr. Purcell was an honest and knowledgeable collaborator, and Tarn and Carlson gave him joint author status on a variety of projects as a result. Mr. Purcell, now calling himself a Maya shaman, has in the 1990s written or had written for him a self-puffing volume about without any scholarly basis whatsoever, but full of anthropology bashing. His claim in essence is that all costumbre is now dead in Atitlán, but lives inside of him. Therefore, he is the only atiqueto that is left. We regret that. Without warning, he has broken all the agreements made with us and reiterated over the years to work within a scholarly context. Further, we regret this blatant commercialization of Native American rituals and beliefs at the hands of someone who once respected them. I find that a little hard to believe, but maybe not so, but Secrets of the Talking Jaguar is one of my favorite books, and I've recommended it to people, maybe because it is a little bit fictional. And here's my last slide. Mom says, never be ashamed of who you are or what you do. Celebrate life to the fullest. You never know when it's your time for renewal. So with that, I will stop my share and come back.
Very good, Jim. Thank you so much. That was a great talk. We really appreciate it. If you have questions for Jim, please use your chat box and forward Jim what you would like him to answer.
I want to thank you all for being here. I mean, my gosh, the sound of me chomping on celery is switching me over. Do we have any questions from anybody? Let me look through my presenters again. There's Barbara. Oh, we got some new people in here. Zach, great to see you, buddy. You must be done teaching. Jennifer, you're still with us.
I don't see anything on the chat, Jim. Do you see anything?
Is that Janice? Yeah. Jennifer says, very interesting, thanks. And Zach says, thanks, Jim, that was lovely. You mentioned some iconographic traits of the early Godel, that he smokes a lot at Sarah. Are there other similarities? Well, really, that the Godel was also the patron of the travelers, the merchants, the traders. it was part of Maximón also comment. MAS is the Maya word for tobacco. And so it's Maya tobacco with Saint Simon, Maximón. The main thing is the jaguar, you know, that you see, the jaguar pelt, and the fact that they traveled along these trade routes sometimes at night. So jaguars were just like the coralus snake that shows up in the iconography of especially Chichen Itza or Uxmal. But these were the jaguars, and the rattlesnakes were something that could kill mankind. So they were very powerful omens and had to be dealt with. Otherwise, I'm not sure of too much else. They always have the bird on their hats, Gadel. And well done. They enjoyed the photos of our 2000 trip. Thank you, Janice. And when Mary Lou Ridinger talks with us in January, she'll be talking about early trade routes. So that's an interesting tie-in.
All right.
Thank you, thank you.
If that's it, I'd like to thank all of you in attendance this evening, both members and non-members. We're very happy to be with us. Please remember November 18th, 8 o'clock, lecture with Mark Brenner. And again, I want to thank Jim for his great talk tonight. I want to thank my officers, Keith Merwin and Janet Meese, for their help. And this concludes tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Hey, Nicholas.
It was well worth attending. Jim, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Of course, I'm not that far from Lake Atitlán. I'm at 1,500 meters overlooking 3 volcanoes.
Wow. In Guatemala City, right?
I'm in Guatemala City, on the outskirts of the city, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And Rosemary from the Pre-Columbian Society of Washington, D.C. Nice to see you. And Nicholas, I'm sure sometime next year we'd love to have you be with us and do a Zoom event with us.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. If the crocodiles in Isabel we're working out in the Caribbean now for the next 15 months. We just have a contract signed with the government there for 15 months of studying plants and animals.
Oh, great. That's great.
But plants and animals related to the Maya culture. So we're finding roofing material that's palms that don't grow in Petén, for example. They only grow on the coast.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, everybody want to wrap it up?
Very good. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next month.
All right. Thanks for coming, y'all.
Thank you.
Hey, Rosemary.